The legislature coming back today in Illinois, and they've got some issues they're going to tackle when it comes to the Second Amendment and gun control, but you've got stories across the country impacting gun owners from a variety of different angles, including the situation that happened, just an absolutely horrific situation in Minnesota, where if you follow what's going on in the Twitter sphere, the suspect in where several first responders were shot and killed in a hostage situation. It looks like this individual was actually somebody who was prohibited from owning firearms, but had firearms. So obviously there's going to be a lot of conversation about gun control in the aftermath of something like that. And this after the highly publicized Kansas City Super Bowl parade shooting that happened. And the suspects in that case apparently being juveniles, and the situation there seeming to be a conflict of some sort, not somebody who is hell-bent on going out and taking out a bunch of people, but either way, people being caught in the crossfire there, and just a horrific story. But clearly some advocates are using these instances as ways to try to pass more laws to go after and control who owns and what kind of firearms they own. Welcome in, Bishop on Air. It is every morning we hang out and go through some of these stories with you. I deal a lot with what's going on in Illinois in particular, but obviously we've been tracking the gun and magazine ban in the state of Illinois. Not many updates on that except for in 8 days in the Southern District of Illinois. You've got the federal judge who's moving forward with the merits of the challenge of Illinois' gun and magazine ban. We've been tracking that for well over a year now, as the gun and magazine ban in the state was implemented back on January 10th of 2023, and a whole series of lawsuits against that measure. So we'll continue to track that, including leading up to the February 28th status hearing scheduling conference with the plaintiffs' attorneys from the four groups there, laying out who their witnesses and experts and evidence they're hoping to present. But let's go through some of these headlines, especially when it comes to the national picture, and then we'll take a look at just some of the legislation that could come up at the Illinois State House today, including a measure about juvenile firearm offenses, a firearms task force. You've even got measures from Republicans that could come up today dealing with firearms. So we'll take a look at some of that and a long list of bills that the Illinois House could consider in committees today when they return. But let's get back to the national headlines here. Of course, you've got the situation in Minnesota that is heart-wrenching to even think this type of thing happens, but it does. You've got a series of first responders that were shot and killed in Minnesota, and the news coming out that that suspect that killed a cop and a first responder, I think a firefighter as well in the mix, with two officers and several shot. But that suspect apparently was a felon, barred from owning guns. So it goes to show that even gun laws, and this is something that the Second Amendment advocates say, is criminals don't follow gun laws, and they commit heinous crimes breaking the law. So you can have all of these laws stacked up that make it difficult for non-violent individuals to protect themselves, while criminals just don't follow that. So we'll see how that conversation goes. But this is after you, of course, got the measures that could be passed in Missouri or not passed in Missouri dealing with firearm control. Here's Bearing Arms reporting that Missouri lawmakers won't move a bill that repeals some gun-free zones after that Kansas City shooting. So there was some effort in Missouri to try to bring about relaxing these so-called gun-free zones, where they tell you can't carry a firearm even if you're a concealed carry permit holder. And I would imagine that parades are probably one of those. But again, criminals will act in a criminal manner. And that is something I think is still part of this debate as to, do we make things more onerous for individuals to protect themselves, while criminals, again, time and again, seem to not follow the law. So you've got that situation in Missouri. All right, so Missouri's going to be handling a variety of things when it comes to legislation with their state legislature. But you also have down in Louisiana, apparently, an effort's underway to bring about constitutional carry. And the National Association for Gun Rights messaging on X saying that they dropped 80,000 petitions in the Bayou State, urging them to pass a clean constitutional carry bill. And they make a little joke with the picture of their attorneys and the people collecting the petitions and all the boxes of petitions. And they say, is that our next album cover or what? So it's interesting to see some of the humor with this situation, especially as important of a situation many of you see it as is. But then you also have in Arizona, you've got Second Amendment advocacy groups that are going to be taken to the Capitol there. Very similar, I imagine, to what we have in Illinois with Illinois Gun Owner Lobby Day. So again, Illinois Gun Owner Lobby Day is in April. So in Arizona, looks like they're going to be planning that a little bit earlier on. So all of these different state legislatures, clearly this is an issue that is top of mind for many, including over in Hawaii, where the Hawaii Firearms Coalition says, looking at the committee report from the last hearing on their Hawaii Senate Bill 3196, it's clear that the deck is stacked against us, but we fight on. Over 1,080 pieces of testimony in opposition to the bill were submitted, with just over 100 in support. And it's interesting because we see similar types of lopsided, support and opposition for firearm legislation. I mean, in Illinois, for instance, whenever they were coming out with the gun and magazine ban, when it was going through committees, the amount of opposition filed against the gun and magazine ban, multiple iterations of it, it was like 30-1 in some instances. It might be a little hyperbolic. I'll have to go back and check my notes, but it was clear that there just was not a lot of support, at least from those who were filing witness slips in Illinois to address the gun and magazine ban, saying that they don't like it. So we'll continue to see what happens in other states as well. But while states continue to deal with various measures, including a measure in California, which apparently would have insurance companies require individuals looking for insurance to get a certain plan and disclose if they have firearms. Well, that measure, some see it as setting up a backdoor gun registry in California. But then you have up in Chicago, as the Firearms Policy Coalition shared with the Chicago ATF and Customs and Border Patrol, saying that Chicago halted 43 shipments carrying various parts used to modify weapons within the first 43 days of 2024. Customs and Border Protection works with the ATF and others to deny transnational crime organizations weapons and illicit proceeds that fuel their activities. So they show some, what are those switches, and a silencer of sorts or a suppressor. So it looks like, up in Chicago, they're trying to stop these types of things from getting onto the streets. So while you've got laws in place, it doesn't seem that these laws necessarily prohibit a lot of this type of activity, and criminals are going to get their hands on these things anyways. But while you've got the state legislatures doing what they're doing, and you've got including Missouri and Louisiana and California and Arizona, Hawaii, the U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear the arguments on the bump stock ban. And this is coming from Everytown. Everytown's a gun control advocacy organization. They say the Supreme Court will soon hear a challenge to ATF's ban on bump stocks, devices that effectively turn, quote, assault weapons into machine guns. And the Supreme Court of the United States, Everytown says, must prioritize public safety and uphold this ban. So they share an article from everytown.org about what they think people need to know about this case. But what's interesting is this particular case, when it comes to the bump stocks, really, I think, it's going to be interesting to see how the conversation about what is a, quote, assault weapon, is it a semi-automatic firearm? Because a bump stock, they say, turns that into an automatic firearm when, it's just a little like spring-loaded device of sorts that, just kind of you hold the trigger and it recoils for you, and that uses that recoil as a way to get to the next trigger pull without actually having to pull the trigger. That's just my layman's understanding of it. But if you've got the state in that case talking about how it turns semi-automatic firearms, legal semi-automatic firearms, into machine guns, isn't that a clear delineation? And how is that type of argument going to be used in a case like in Illinois challenging the gun and magazine ban? So interesting to see the intersectionality of these types of things. So that's what's happening across the country. What's happening in Illinois today? The state legislature is back in session, and there's a whole bunch of bills in the House that could be brought up. There's HB 90, which is a measure dealing with juvenile and firearms offenses. It talks about how, and we'll just pull this up here and read some of it, provides that if the minor has previously been placed on probation for an offense that involves the possession or discharge of a firearm not causing injury, and in conviction is convicted of a subsequent offense involving the possession or discharge of a firearm not causing any injury, then the court shall require the minor to participate in a social service program. So a social service program for juveniles caught with firearms, shooting them off illegally. You've got Thaddeus Jones with House Bill 1224 that could be brought up in committee today, and it highlights a task force consisting of 24 police officers appointed by the Director of Illinois State Police, and the members of the task force shall select a chairperson, provide that members of the task force shall receive no compensation, and they shall be reimbursed for necessary expenses incurred during performance of the duties, but provides that the task force shall meet at least once monthly to study ways to reduce violence in local communities caused by illegal use of firearms, and to make recommendations to the Governor and General Assembly on suggested legislative solutions to this problem. So another task force to address an issue of violence in places like Chicago. Not the only types of things that they could deal with when it comes to firearms, just looking at the litany of various legislative measures that could come up in committee today. So those were just a couple. I know that Amy Ellick has a couple of measures as well dealing with firearms. We'll see if we can find those really quick. The FOID concealed carry measure. This is House Bill 4260, which could be heard in the Judiciary Criminal Committee at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So we'll see what happens there. But this measure from a Republican state representative, Amy Ellick, that amends the FOID Card Act and provides that Illinois State Police, if they deny an application for or revoke and seize a firearm owner identification card because of an individual been a patient in a mental health facility, then the notice to the applicant or card holder of denial of an application for or revocation of a person's FOID card shall include the date and times of the admission and the place for where a person was held at a mental health facility. So in a way, it's like, if you're gonna use this as a means of going after somebody's FOID card, then you need to spell out exactly what it is. But it also provides that the cost for replacing a FOID card and concealed carry license is $5 if the person has changed his or her address. So that would change that particular element of the FOID card. So some other measures that could come up. Let's see here. Just cycling through firearms offense, habitual criminal. John Cabello also has a measure to repeal the FOID Act. So that's in judiciary. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to be brought up. It just means that it's in the Judiciary Committee, which is actually interesting because previously you hadn't had all of these measures in committee. You actually had, them just languish in the Rules Committee, but apparently these measures are being put into committees. So John Cabello has this measure to repeal the FOID Act. He also has a measure about firearms habitual criminals. So we'll see what happens with those, if those get brought up and actually discussed, or how they proceed with those. Anthony DeLuca has another one with firearm offenses for adults and juveniles. You've got a variety of other legislation that could come up in committee dealing with unserialized firearms. Margaret Croak, Democrat. Let's see what this measure does. This measure would make it a Class 4 felony for the penalty of a first violation of the provision of that prohibits the knowing possession, transportation, purchase, or receipt of an unfinished frame or receiver. So this could come up in the Judiciary Committee today. in the House, which again would ultimately make it a Class 4 felony for possessing a unfinished frame or receiver. The party possessing or receiving the unfinished frame or receiver is a federal firearms importer, and this is unless it's an importer or federal firearms manufacturer. The unfinished frame or receiver is possessed or transported by a person for transfer to a federal firearms importer or federal firearms manufacturer, or the unfinished frame or receiver has been imprinted with a serial number issued by a federal firearms importer or federal firearms manufacturer. So again, this is a measure, it's House Bill 4550, could be heard today in the Illinois House Judicial Committee, the Judiciary Criminal Committee. Let's see what else we got coming up. Just scanning over the, several dozen bills that could come up in committee today. Variety of different things, from energy to transportation to a whole host of things. So those are just some of the bills in the Illinois legislature that could come up today in the House Judiciary Criminal Committee. So I'll be monitoring that and let you know what comes up, what advances, and so on. So we'll keep you posted on that here with Bishop on Air. Appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning. Looks like things are going good, at least with the live stream. So be sure to be there with us each and every weekday morning as we go live and break down some of these important things you need to know about. All right, I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning here with Bishop on Air.